Jonathan Mickles with the Strategic Multifamily Investing Podcast. And today I have with me Derek Dombeck. How are you doing, Derek?
I'm awesome, Jonathan. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So we were just having a conversation a little bit about the artwork over your shoulder there. You said that that's Japanese?
Yeah, Japanese, Okinawan, something like that. But the word is ikigai, and its translation is reason for being. And essentially, I have it as my screensaver on my phone. I have it over my shoulder, as you can see now. But it basically says if you live your life doing what you want, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for, you can live in perfect harmony, which is ikigai. So it's just kind of a good reminder to, especially when things are going bad or you're having a rough day. It's a good reminder to kind of recenter yourself.
Yep. Lean into the good stuff. So real estate. What type of real estate are you in right now?
I've been in just about every type of real estate you can imagine, from the residential and light commercial side. I don't get into, or haven't gotten into, a lot of the industrial or really large commercial projects. So my bread and butter has always been residential or small multis, but I've got some quarries, involved in a potential build out of an RV park right now. We're in negotiations on a laundromat. We're also potentially buying out a painting contracting business that's got almost 50 employees. So,
Wow.
and I do a fair amount of actually creative deal structuring for other people, like consulting or joint venturing with other wholesalers or real estate investors that don't know how to use alternative methods of purchasing or controlling property.
Well, that's a very wide range of real estate. This is going to be a very interesting conversation. So
Yeah.
before we go there, I'd like to kind of, start at the beginning. Like, how did you get involved in real estate? What was the thing that said, yeah, I think I want to do something with real estate, bread and butter?
I think I lost a bet, and this is my penance. I don't know. No, I was a construction worker when I started out, straight out of high school, and I often tell people I have a PhD and a good work ethic, a public high school diploma, and a work ethic.
There you go.
And early on in my 20s, I figured out that I could, using my own sweat equity and my own, two hands, I could build up some rental properties and do the work myself, which is not a great way to scale, but it's a great way to learn the business. And so my wife Tracy and I built up a fairly decent portfolio from starting in 2003 through 2007. And then when the markets crashed, we got wiped out, and it was a
Well,
pretty tough time. Um, but that was a turning point, and I often say now that was the biggest blessing I ever got, because it forced us to do one of two things: either quit, which was not an option, or find another way. And when you're not bankable and you can't, um, you really can't save enough money in a short amount of time. We both had good jobs, which was a saving grace. But we had to learn, number one, how to talk to people, how to properly talk to people and negotiate, which I could go off on an entire tangent just on that, and how to buy and control property without using banks.
well, let's go back a little bit. I mean, that was a lot of information, a lot of years covered. So when you said you were right out of high school in construction, what trade were you in? Was it carpentry?
No, I actually was into pipe trades, so I put in sprinklers for fire protection. But I was on job sites with all the other trades, of course, making friends with all the other trades, which was great because many people were looking for side work, nights and weekends type of stuff. And I already knew their quality of work because I worked with them on job sites. So it was that was pretty easy to build out a workforce to fix up rentals and start flipping properties.
So then where did your cash come from if you were to get into your first property? I mean, because
So
you,
the first properties, we were bankable, and back
okay.
then in the
What does
early
that
mid
what does that what does
2000s,
bankable mean? Just so everybody else understands. I think I understand what
good
you mean, but
Yeah, good credit, good income, W-2 jobs. The banks were fighting over our business. And I mean, we were putting down 5% to 20% on loans, but we were doing it via equity in other properties.
Gotcha.
So they would cross collateralize, or I think the very first two properties that we bought, we used my wife's 401k and borrowed against it from her
There you
corporate
go.
job. And then moving forward from there, it was all equity. It was a growth period. So we thought we were God's gift to real estate investing. You know, oh my God, look how great we are. We're building this up. We built a $4 million portfolio in 3 years.
Yeah.
Except
So
we weren't God's gift to anything, right? Like
I mean,
we
it was a crazy time during that time. I was
yeah.
actually lending. I was a loan originator around about that same time, and if you had a pulse or not, people were getting loans.
Yeah.
This as long as you could, state the right thing.
Yeah.
For some people, that was what they did. I actually saw an associate of mine. This was, again, before a lot of the new laws that have come
Hmm.
into view. What we had is a yield spread premium, right? Which
Hmm.
means that when, I give you the loan, you may have to pay 1 or 2%, 3% maybe on the front end, depending on what your credit was. But then the bank would then pay me,
Hmm.
X number of percentage, depending on the interest rate that I gave you moving forward, because I would look at the charts and things. And so I saw an associate of mine wind up making, and I'm not being facetious when I say this, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of like 13 points total
Yeah.
from what he was charging on the front and what the bank was giving him on the back on that one particular loan. And, I said, this is your friend that you're doing this to. So, yeah, it was a lot of very creative.
Imagine what he did to people he didn't like.
It's very creative back then, but that's good. Your wife had a 401k that you borrowed against. And let me ask this question, because, there are others who have, a spouse or partner, that are looking to potentially, convince to get
Hmm.
into, real estate. What was there how long were you together by this time that you're doing this? And how did you convince her, or was there a need to convince her to get involved?
Not at that point, because when I'd met my wife, I was in the process of building my own home, and before I was a real estate investor. And so our date nights were, drywalling, wiring, framing, shoveling dirt, whatever it took. And I married a farmer's daughter, so she's used to working anyways. But ultimately, by the time of 2 or 3 years after that, when we decided to get into real estate investing, she was convinced that we could absolutely build something with our equity, our sweat equity. And so I didn't really have to talk her into it. What was the bigger challenge was getting her mindset as far as how big we could go,
Mm,
right? And
mm.
and that's tough for a lot of people, because when you first start out, your friends and family, in air quotes, are concerned about you, and they're so worried that you're going to make a mistake. And in reality, yeah, they might be saying that out of love, and they might actually not want you to make a mistake, but they also don't want you to succeed so much that you leave them behind. And
Really? Why,
and
why do you say that? That's very interesting that you say that. Why do you say that?
well, because if I'm being frank, a lot of people are lazy, and it's so much easier to make excuses. Like, how many people will tell you, don't be a landlord, that's you're going to have all these problems, and people are going to flood your basements if you have basements, or they're going to destroy your properties, pets are terrible, kids are terrible. Like, it's always the negative stuff, right? Nobody ever talks about the other 95% of tenants that are fantastic, because they're boring, they're not sexy to talk about. So when your friends and family who are not in the business are warning you about being a landlord, it's not because they have experience. It's because they heard a horror story, the 5% horror stories. And it's amazing how in the beginning, the first, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever your time frame is on building up, everybody's worried about you and they're so concerned. And then the coin flips over and now they're saying, you're lucky. It's not fair. You get to take vacations. You get to do this. You get to do that. Well, BS, right? You
You
earned
put
it.
in the work. You put
You
in the
put in the
work.
work.
So,
And that's
mhm.
that's the part where yes, they may be concerned about you, but they're more than likely self-centered and they're looking at themselves in a mirror saying, I'm never going to have that. I'm never going to do that. It's their own problem. And one of my favorite quotes is somebody else's opinion about you is none of your business.
That's really good. So where did you get your mindset? I mean, how did you develop your mindset? I mean, you had a great work ethic, right? And put in hard work in a high school diploma. So
So, I grew up, I'm in the upper Midwest. I live in Wisconsin and, up here at my generation, I had my first job when I was 12 years old and I worked on dairy farms. I worked side construction jobs. I was always doing something physical. And I had a dad that was into construction trades who always said, you put in the time you're being paid for. You don't cheat anybody. You do what you say you're going to do, no matter what. And if you take losses, you take losses, but you don't ever let somebody else suffer because of your actions. And then he passed away at age 64,
mm,
4 years after retiring from the trades.
mm,
And a lot of my mindset shift came from him passing away early in my life because there's a lot of things that I do today that maybe don't make sense to the outside world, but tomorrow's never guaranteed. And I know all the things that him and my mom planned to do in retirement that he was never able to do.
mm.
So my mindset now, if you look over my shoulder, if you're watching this, but if you can't, Generations of Wealth is my platform, and our tagline is "Live your vision, love your life." And the problem, Jonathan, is most people get into our industry or any business, and they end up working 40, 50, 60, 70 or more hours a week, lying to themselves, saying, someday I'll be able to enjoy the fruits of my labor. Someday all of this will be worth it. I'm just doing this for a while, which is a bunch of crap. Because while you're trying to build up some big monstrous business, you're actually not living your life today. You're likely hurting your friends and family and children if you have children. And that was one of the big turning points for me, which was about 6 years ago. I got introduced to the right group of people in a mastermind setting and started helping me figure out what I wanted my personal vision to look like, what I want my personal days, weeks, months, years to look like. And then and only then should you build your business to fit in the time that's left in any given week, not the other way around, which is what almost everybody does. So our goal is to work and do things that we enjoy that are part of our vision. And so I'll give you an example. My wife and I both really enjoy traveling. It is part of both of our visions. Our kids are involved in our business. That's part of why it's called Generations of Wealth. But we incorporate travel into our business. So I currently host 3 national mastermind groups. Each group gets together twice a year in
Mm.
person and monthly on Zoom. But every time we travel on one of those retreats, we're going somewhere really nice that we want to go to. So we hosted a retreat in Dominican Republic in January, Aruba in December, a couple of them in Myrtle Beach this fall, Puerto Vallarta, Mexico last spring. So we're able to live our vision and still, have a revenue stream. I mean, it is a business, and it can all be incorporated in one.
That's awesome, man. So you mentioned going back to your story that, from 2003 or so until 2007, you all had built together a $4 million portfolio. Did I hear that correctly?
Mm-hmm.
So then you mentioned that you all got wiped out. And my thought is if you were collateralizing the properties with 10 and 20% of equity that were in the other properties, and those things were cash flowing, how is it that you were wiped out during that time?
Oh, you said the magic number or the magic word, cash flow. So back then, I didn't know what I didn't know. So we were buying cash flow properties in Wisconsin, but we were also building new construction projects and buying a few existing in Florida.
Hmm.
Florida real estate was not cash flowing. It was designed to break even at the beginning of the projects, but once the markets turned, they were hemorrhaging cash very, very quickly. So the bulk of our value on our you know our personal financial statement was in the Florida real estate. The actual cash flow was in Wisconsin, but the cash flow in Wisconsin, there was no way it could cover the negative in Florida. So at 2007 through 2009, I had 8 properties in Florida that were in default and actively being foreclosed upon. And so I was able to learn how to negotiate my own short sales and, go through that whole process with all those different lenders. Um, and that was another key moment for us is I started documenting what I was doing different than what everybody else was doing because people were responding to me in a positive way as I was negotiating through a lot of these different traumatic
Give,
scenarios.
give me an example of what that was about. I mean, I kind of know a little
It,
bit
it,
about
it's
lost mid.
Well, it's pretty easy. I wasn't blaming the entire world for everything that was going on. I was doing the opposite of what the herd was doing, right? And I'm not saying I wasn't wronged and I wasn't, kind of screwed over in a few of those cases, but at the end of the day, I signed the documents. I'm the responsible party. It doesn't matter. Today, there's people that are starting to have some trouble in real estate because they bought properties that cash flowed at 4 or 5% rates. They don't cash flow at 8. So now they're going to start playing the blame game. And the Fed raised the interest rate or the government this or politics that. Well, take responsibility for your own damn actions is what I did. And I sat down with some of these bank presidents and I called a meeting specifically in my local market because the
Hmm.
stuff in Florida I couldn't do anything about. I was just a file. Most of those lenders were shut down, bought out 3 different times, and I was just dealing with somebody in India answering the phone. But my local small community banks, I went in, I said I want to meet with a bank president and my loan officer, and we mapped out a plan of what we were going to do and how we were going to stay stable because the stuff in Wisconsin was taking care of itself financially. I just, I had 3-year balloons on most of those commercial loans, and I needed them
Oh,
to be able to extend those loans out when they came due, even though my credit was in the toilet and I had active foreclosures against me. And I remember that was probably 2000, late 2007, early 2008, when I sat down with this one specific banker, and he said to me, he said, absolutely nobody does what you're doing right now. Everybody hides. They try and ditch us, ghost us. They don't return calls. Said the fact that you called this meeting and you came in with all this documentation with a plan will absolutely work with you in any way, shape, or form we're allowed to, because they still have a regulating body, you
sure.
know. And that bank, to this day, I still work with that bank.
So there,
Um,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
and the point of that was, Jonathan, that I started to realize how I presented myself in certain ways really had an impact. And I started spending the next several years studying anything I could about sales, negotiations, psychology of how the brain works when it comes to that stuff. And it's kind of a pet peeve of mine where, people and maybe some of your listeners have gone out and spent tens of thousands of dollars with some guru to learn how to wholesale or learn how to buy multifamily or fill in the blank. And they spend zero time and zero money learning how to actually talk to people. And when somebody spends, I don't know, $5,000 on a wholesaling course, and the wholesaling course says, make $10,000 your first week in wholesaling, well, that's sexy and that's easy to sell. If I sell a course that says, well, spend 10,000 hours learning how to negotiate and the rest of your life will be gravy, people don't do it because it's a lot of time and it's boring. But that
So
is reality.
there's several questions that come to my mind. What are some of the courses, uh, YouTube channels, books that you read on negotiation that you would recommend?
Well, some of my favorites that had impact back then were Oren Klaff is the author of uh, Pitch Anything, and then his follow-up book was Flip the Script. And I like Oren's writings. I like those two books. And a lot of the rest of them, it wasn't that the whole book was impactful. It was you take nuggets from anything and everything you listen to. Gosh, I remember going back to a Donald Trump book, Negotiations 101 or something like that, back in the early 90s, or published in maybe it was early 2000s, whatever it was.
Mhm.
But what I was really doing was just taking bits and pieces. And then I would go to a face-to-face conversation, and if I couldn't specifically take notes at the kitchen table, as soon as I left and I was back in my vehicle, I would just start writing down what happened, what was their body language, what was my response to what they said, how did they react to what I said. And over time, I really started to see patterns.
Mm.
And now, to me, it's just like when a quarterback, okay, who's your favorite football team? I gotta tread lightly here, maybe.
Yeah, go for it, man. You got it. This is
No,
Super Bowl season, so
I'll use the Packers because I'm a Packer fan.
that's
I
fine.
mean, before it was Aaron Rodgers, now it's Love. When Love walks up to the line and he calls an audible in a split second, when you're a negotiations master, that's what you're doing. You are constantly calling audibles based off of what the other party is saying, doing, how they're reacting, what their body language is, what their tone is, and you can literally lead a conversation any direction you want it to go.
Mm.
100%.
Gotcha.
Now, you can also manipulate people in a negative way. And so what's the difference between leading and manipulating?
There you go. That was my next question. Where's the difference between either leading or negotiating and manipulation? Yeah, go for it.
Well, the difference is your intent. If your intent is malicious, you're manipulating. If your intent is helpful, then you're leading. Otherwise, there's no difference. So if you're going to be in an unscrupulous person of low morals, you're not going to last. I mean, over time, the world has a way of weeding those people out, right? But
All right.
so that's really my passion now. I actually teach a 2-day negotiations course on how I talk to people and my strategies. That's not real estate centered. It's just literally every social interaction you ever have from the time you wake up in the morning till the time you go to bed is a negotiation.
That's
It
good.
really is.
So there is someone says there's another quote that I've heard, and tell me what you think about this one. They said, "You don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. You don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate."
I mean, I like that to a degree.
Okay.
I think it has a negative connotation that somebody has to win and somebody has to lose. And I
Hmm.
don't believe that. I believe if you're doing it properly, everybody should walk away and the end result should be satisfactory to everybody. Not that they're, whistling Dixie and you know, ecstatic, but nobody should be unhappy in a negotiation.
Gotcha.
And a lot of the real estate deals I do are brought to me by, realtors, attorneys, accountants. I get a lot of referral business, and they're shocked at when I end up getting a deal. Like current, I'll tell you about one that's going on right now. There's
Sure.
a waterfront property that a realtor brought to me. It's not listed on the MLS, so she was courting these people. She was trying to get the listing. She didn't have the listing yet, but we have a very good relationship. We've worked together for years. And she brought me in to meet with them in person because she's like, Derek, I could list this on the MLS, but it's an estate situation. Grandma's been dead 2 years. They don't have the heart to throw grandma's stuff out. This place needs to be cleaned up, cleaned out. And we're talking about a 9-acre property on water with 1,200 feet of frontage, with a 3-bedroom, 2.5-bath home, a one kind of like a cabin that's got a loft, a big 3-car garage, and an additional outbuilding. And all of them are full of stuff. Plus the yard, the water's edge, all needs clean up, right? So she can't get them what they need, and they can't do the work.
Mhm.
So I asked her before we went and met with them, I said, do you think they're open to anything creative, or is this strictly a cash offer? And she said, I really think they need the cash because there's a couple heirs that are out of state who are, I can't talk to face to face, and are typically the problem children when you're negotiating an estate situation.
Mhm.
So just sat down. I mean, they showed me the property, told me the entire history, how grandpa built it, everything else. It was awesome. But the turning point was about an hour and a half into our meeting. And they started telling me how much they really didn't care for the uncle who's out of state.
Mhm.
And he's being hard to deal with. And they really wanted about an acre to an acre and a half off of that chunk of property, because the grandson's house is adjoining, and he doesn't ever want somebody to build between him and grandma's house. He doesn't want that. He don't have to look at another house and have another neighbor. Except the uncle is, not on board with, or would be a problem with him trying to parcel that off. And so I asked the question. I said, do you all need your cash from the estate, your percentage, right away? And, they asked a few follow-up questions, of course, what would that look like? But ultimately they said no. I said, okay, well, if I'm able to bring less money to the closing table, we bring enough to where your uncle and your cousin, they get paid out, the rest of the estate gets settled, and I will give you your money, after I rehab the properties and sell them off. Then for doing that and giving them a really damn nice interest rate,
Mhm.
I said, I'll pay for the survey, and I'll section off that acre and a half that you want after closing, and give it to you. And they said, well, they said yes to that to begin with.
Mhm.
But then I said, I'd like for you all to participate in the transaction, meaning if I sell it for over a certain threshold, I'll give you an additional $25,000.
Wow.
But I said, if I sell it below this floor, then you're only getting our original agreement. And they love that idea
Got it.
because they're getting everything they want. And that's not very creative, but the realtor was sitting there listening to this entire conversation, and she's heard me do this before, but she was still shocked. She's like, I cannot believe that they're willing to do that. And the point of this story is, so many people go into negotiations thinking it's all about money. And it's not often it's not about money at all.
Yeah, it's
These
about the
people,
out of town people in this situation, right? As long
it
as they're
is,
satisfied, and
and
we keep them going.
the grandson lives there. If I don't get him on my side, everything I do throughout the renovation phase, I want to subdivide that acreage. I want to turn that into 3 lots. Like, he could be my biggest nightmare. I need him on my side. So giving him a little extra, if I sell it for over, the number is 900,000. If I sell for over $900,000, they get an extra 25,000 in their pocket. Well, now they're my biggest cheerleaders,
Mhm.
right? So it's, you got to look at this from so many different angles, but you got to do it in a split second. Like this is on the fly.
So how
You know?
can people get to your negotiation course? I mean, how do they get access to that?
I have a live negotiations course coming up February 22nd and 23rd. Um, I don't know when this show will air, Jonathan, but after
It-
that, there will be a recording in an online module that I'll be making available. So I'll give everybody my email address. If this is something that you'd be interested in being on a mailing list for in the future, I'm more than happy to add you to that. But
Sure. What's the email address? Go ahead and give that to the people now.
yeah, so Derek at globalgow.com. Derek is the short version. I think my mom thought it might have been too stupid for the long version. I don't know. But it's DEREK at globalgow.com. And since we just threw that out there, I also have a couple of international best-selling books that I was a co-author in. And anybody that sends me an email and says, "Hey, I heard you on the Red Boot Show with Jonathan," I'll send you an electronic version of those two books, perfectly free, no strings attached. So
Absolutely, man. This has been amazing here, if you will, talking about negotiation and making sure that you did some things. So now that you have, gone through 2008, 2009, right, and having to do a lot of the workouts, you mentioned that you had a balloon payment that you were using for the properties in Florida, I believe. So it sounds like those properties pretty much got short sold or foreclosed on. You kept the properties in Wisconsin, right?
yeah,
And
so
you
the ones in
and you
Wisconsin were on commercial loans that had 3-year calls or 3-year balloons. So they had to be rewritten every 3 years. And that's what I had to make sure I didn't lose that lender when it came time to rewrite those, even though my credit was in the toilet.
got it. So so you had a balloon on each of the properties that you were okay, gotcha. So it wasn't like you went in and for a long, would you rewrite history and go back and go for a longer 30-year fixed kind of loan product on those things?
That's a loaded question because knowing what I know now, 20 years later, I would never use the bank to begin with. But so
Well, okay, if you would have never used a bank, what would you have
yeah.
used then?
Well, so that's what I started doing. So 2009, 10, 11, 12, out of necessity, I started taking on partners. I started to do joint ventures and ultimately learned how to start raising private capital. And it got to a point with my business partner at the time that we were raising more capital than we had deals to keep busy. So, new problem, right? Still a problem, not a bad one, but we don't want our investors to go somewhere else. We can't keep their money busy. What do we do? Well, we had nurtured enough relationships, and this is something different I did in the second half of my career versus the first half. First half, I didn't network. I didn't have anybody to reach out to and to ask for advice and help. I would go to trainings and boot camps
Right.
and seminars, but I'd collect business cards. Yeah, maybe stayed in touch with a couple people for a little while, then pretty soon it just fell by the wayside, right? Huge mistake. I mean, number one, I don't care if you're brand new in this business or you've been in this business for 50 years, your network is so important. You need to build it, nurture it, take care of it, do what you say you're going to do, because that can make you or break you, hands down. But we had, at that point now, we're starting to build a network and we had plenty of other people that were looking for money. Well, we had investors, they had deals. We started an arbitrage lending business, which started as a side gig and grew into a full-blown hard money lending company.
There you go.
And I just exited. My business partner bought me out of the lending business, and ultimately we were doing 20 to 25 loans a month.
Wow.
And that, in the Midwest, that equates to about $2.5 to $3.5 million a month going out the door in short-term loans.
Wow. So
Um,
these were traditional hard money loans that were like 6 months
yeah.
in term,
Mhm.
that were 65, 75% of ARV, that kind of thing,
Yes,
with some
sir.
cash, with some skin in the game for people who are doing fix and flips.
Yep. And
Or
put some
Mhm.
points on top of it. And that was really, really great, except what that took me away from was my love of deal structuring and I'm a deal junkie. I love the creative stuff. I love putting things together. Like, and let me give you a definition of what I define creative real
Thank
estate
you.
deal
That I was going
structuring.
to come back to that. Yes, great.
I could read your mind. It's like a children's book, but I can read it. Um, it Buying something subject to a mortgage is not creative. Using an option is not creative. Using leases is not creative. It's stacking these financing strategies together to solve a problem. That's where the creative comes in. Okay. So I bought a house I don't know, this is probably 5 years ago. Bought a house subject to the first mortgage. She was a couple months behind in payments. Her name was Jan. Okay. So Jan was a couple months behind payments. She needed to relocate very quickly. She needed some cash to relocate, and she wanted pretty close to retail for her house. And the house just needed a good cleaning, some paint and carpet. So took over her first loan subject to and had to catch up to payments. She carried back, after I gave her a $10,000 down payment, she carried back a second mortgage at 0% interest. And I needed to come out of pocket about $20,000. So $10,000 up front,
Right.
about $5,000 to just freshen up the property, and then to catch up her payments. Except I don't like using my own money. It's kind of against my religion. So I called up, I'm very nosy with what my friends have. So I called up my friend Dan, who has a small IRA. And I said, Dan, I would like to use $20,000 of your Roth IRA. I want to give you 6% interest only payments on a quarterly basis and 20% of the equity in the property when I sell it, which equates to, depending on when it actually pays off, you don't know your actual yield yet, but it equates to double-digit returns in his Roth IRA. Okay. Then I lease option the property to tenants. So
Wow.
I stacked a sub to a seller carryback, a participating note with an IRA investor, and a lease option to creatively solve everybody's needs, and everybody benefited.
Now that's a creative deal. That's a very creative deal. That's 4 or 5 different strategies, as you just mentioned, all in one particular deal.
And
And
that one was boring.
that was boring. And that's how they, okay. So many different ways we could go, but I can see now how you have the painting company, right? Because of your trade specialty earlier on in your career. But I don't know where you mentioned that you have a couple of mines or
Oh, quarries? Yeah.
quarries. Yeah, quarries.
Yeah. A farmer called me years ago when we still advertised on Craigslist and was asking it because my Craigslist ad literally said, I buy houses. And he said, do you buy anything else besides houses? And I said, I will look at anything if it makes sense. He said, would you buy my farm and lease it back to me? I'm in foreclosure. I'm in bankruptcy. And I said, in what world would you be able to afford to pay me a lease payment if you can't afford to make your mortgage payments today? And dairy farmers, in Wisconsin have been a dying breed forever, and this guy was a small farmer just trying to survive, which I have family like that. That touches me, personally, but business wise, I'll throw you a rope and pull you out of the quicksand, but I'm not jumping in with you.
Gotcha.
So I said, well, how am I going to be making my money back? And he said, underneath my fields, there is millions of yards of sand. But because he was in an agricultural program that prevents them from using their land for anything other than agricultural purposes, and it gives them tax advantages, he could not sell a single scoop of sand, but a new owner could. So I bought the entire farm. We signed a lease contract with them with an option for them to get their farm back at some point if they performed. And then we permitted the back end of the farm into an operating mineral quarry, which primarily is sand. And that was about 10 years ago, 9 or 10 years ago at this point.
So that's a
And
cash cow right about now.
Well, yeah, it's not as glamorous as it sounds.
Okay.
They ultimately failed, filed bankruptcy. I lost 32 grand to their bankruptcy. Then I had to remodel an old farmhouse, which I had never had any intentions of remodeling. So that was another $45,000. So plus just all the BS and the drama of, you know, they've been out of there for almost 3 years now.
Yeah.
And then I sold off the buildings and stuff after I renovated. But it is finally now where it's true mailbox money because I'm not actively doing anything there. Because I just contract to an excavating company and they pay me. Like I have a love for dump trucks. Every
So
time a
you
dump truck rolls
so
down the road,
so
I
you
get paid.
sold off the house on the farm, so you in pieces of that, but you still kept the mining
Yeah.
of or okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
so I still own the quarry, and the downside of it is because of where we live, and depending on the winter months, you know, when it's frozen up here, there's not a lot of minerals being sold in January, February, March, April. So it's really a 7 or 8 month season that we have. So it, but at this point, it's a royalty. I just get a royalty off of every scoop of sand that goes into a truck, and that's a great gig, and I privately funded that. So my private investor, actually, my private investor for the first 5 years was the only one making money on that deal, but that's okay.
Yeah, because again, you use 4 or 5 different creative ways to stack and negotiate. So listen,
Yeah,
this has been a master class, and while I think that this podcast will be posted after February the 23rd and 24th, I think you said, when
22nd,
you
23rd.
the 22nd and 23rd when your class is going to be out. I would encourage everybody to reach out to Derek and get that class. I know I'm going to reach out and learn a little bit more. I've written down the 2 books that he mentioned, Pitch Anything and Flip the Script. We should be reading those to learn how to negotiate and talk better. And the key is in negotiation, your intent, right? Making sure that everybody walks away with something and you're not there to rob or cheat or steal anyone from anyone. So, as always, at the end of our podcast, we like to ask people, we want the people to give our clients or people the boot. I'll get my words together here. It's the piece of advice that you would have that would spur someone on to the next action that they need to take in their life. Give us the boot.
Give you the boot. Don't be a quitter. Like it is so damn easy to quit on things in life, and I know that sounds very broad, but the reality is there is always a way. And the way is probably not as hard as you think it is if you have the people to reach out to that. Like, I don't have to know how to do everything, Jonathan. I just have to know somebody that does and be humble enough to go ask for help. And that was what I didn't have the first half of my career. Now with our masterminds, with our network, when I come across a crazy deal and I don't know how to structure it, I reach out to somebody and I ask them. And your audience can do the same thing. They've got my contact information.
Yeah, I'll be calling you soon.
Reach
I'll
out.
be.
But that's the sincerity of it. But I'll
Yeah,
also, I'll back that up with don't waste somebody's time,
yeah,
right? Like I don't go to lunch with people anymore because the reality is I'm going to lose at least 2 hours of my day, and I'm going to maybe get a hamburger out of it, and I'm fine helping anybody as long as I know they're going to take action. But if somebody wastes my time, then they're dead to me.
there you
You
go.
know,
Don't waste anyone's time. That's good. So if they're not going to take you out to lunch, right, and you spend that 2 hours, let's reframe it then, because at a lot of conferences, people go
Mhm.
to, they want to buy coffee, they want to buy, lunch, if you will. What should they do now? What should someone who's saying, "Hey, I've got something," or "I think I have something," first of all, should they have something before they want to engage with you? And then secondly, how should they frame the conversation?
They should try and bring value first and foremost. Don't just come in there one side and trying to take, right? And people offer me all the time. They're like, we appreciate you. What can we do to help you? And oftentimes there's nothing they can do to help me today, but the fact that they offered is very important, right? Now I still lead a local RIA group. That's the night of the month that, I'm there until the last person leaves. I will sit and talk and answer questions no matter what. But if they call me the next day, I'm running my own business and I just can't. Now, if somebody shoots me an email and says, "Hey, you know what? I've got a question on this deal. Can I have 15 minutes with you?" Sure. And I tell everybody, advice is free. If it goes beyond the 15, 30 minutes and it's consulting, then let's talk about what's in it for all of us, right? Don't be so, I don't want to cuss on your show. Don't don't
Thank you.
step over a dollar to pick up a dime. Okay? There's got to be pieces for everybody, and there should be in your deals, because you might get one deal and you might just hoard it for yourself, but then you didn't get any deals after that because you didn't help anyone else, or you didn't allow anyone else to help you. You didn't have anybody. And I'm not trying to weasel in on anybody's deals either. I'm just saying be respectful of each other. If a realtor brings you a good deal, that realtor should get paid, right? If a private investor is investing in your deals, pay them well, take care of them. If somebody's giving you sage advice, don't take that for granted. Don't, this sounds really bad. This actually sounds like I'm soliciting your listeners to come to me because I want to get paid. And that's not what I'm
Sure.
trying to say. It's really not. But I just see it so often, right? People are very one-sided. And
Mhm.
as long as you're not, and you're sincere, because I love this stuff. I would sit and talk like this all day long. But the reality is I still have to get things done just like anybody else does,
Right.
you know? So be
It's
respectful.
gotta be worth your time. And you've just given us some ideas and thoughts about if it's worth your time. I think I take out of this, generally with anyone, instead of just, oh, let me go buy you coffee, you know, do the 15-minute, let's have a conversation, let's do an introduction. Can
Mhm.
I run something by you? And then if it seems to mature beyond there, ask if it's okay to move forward and then give some form of remuneration. Even if you aren't able to do anything, as you said before, for you at that point in time, there may be something that you can develop for the future. But it's a way to respect, it's a rubric or a structure to respect the person's time that can potentially help you. Go ahead. You're about to say something else there.
I met a woman at my RIA meeting a month and a half ago. First time I ever met her. I spent maybe 10 minutes talking to her, maybe 15. And she asked, she said, "What can I do for you?" And I said, "I'm good. I appreciate it." She has made connections to 6 different quality, individuals that she has relationships with in business, and connected me via email. And I've physically spoken with 4 of those 6 already. So I don't know where those relationships might take me. She didn't financially give me anything, but she, out of respect, connected me with some other people that we could all benefit each other. So it doesn't always have to be money. It just, be respectful of each other's time, try and help each other, be in the right place with your heart and your soul, and the rest will work itself out.
Well, Derek, we normally try to keep these to about 30 minutes, and we've almost gone an hour, and it has been amazing. And I want to be respectful of your time, and I say thank you for being so generous with it. This has probably been one of the and I'll say it, one of the most important podcasts that I've had in this reboot, and I've done several of them, and we're out until later on in 2024 when podcasts are going to be shown. But I want to let you know and say thank you again for sharing the value with our listeners today, and I hope that people will take away from this several of the gems that you've given. And all the best. Again, how do people get in contact with you? Your email, your website. I think you have an ebook, I think, right? As well.
Well, yeah, so the books are Next Level Your Life and The Transformational Journey. I'll send you the electronic version if you shoot me an email to derek@globalgow.com. And the Generations of Wealth podcast should be going live about March 1st, 2024. So you can go searching for The Generations of Wealth. podcast out there, and find me that way too. Otherwise, Derek Dombeck on socials, Facebook, LinkedIn, and just hit me up. I'm here to help.
Excellent. Listen, Derek, thank you again for your time, and all the best to you in your endeavors.
I appreciate it, John. Thanks for having me on.